Okay, and we're live. So welcome everybody on this panel discussion on sustainable fashion communication and green marketing. We are going to give everybody a minute to shuffle in, just in case there are issues with logging in, etc. So do feel free to twiddle your thumbs for a minute, and we will be launching right away. Okay, so I think we have enough-ish people in, and people are going to jump in over time anyways. But once again, welcome to this panel discussion on sustainable fashion communication and green marketing. We are going to be talking to this amazing expert panel on how to communicate sustainability as a fashion brand with your customers and end consumers and make green claims that won't get you in trouble with the law. Basically, we're going to talk a little bit about the do's and don'ts of green marketing for fashion brands, some best practice examples, as well as expert tips on how to get about with your communications. We have 4 people joining us today who are, we consider experts in the space. We have Ebru Debbag from Soorty Enterprises, Merryn Chilcott of BAM Clothing, Lavinia Muth of many companies, currently fashion provocateur, and George Harding Rolls of Changing Market Foundations. They are going to be introducing themselves in a bit more detail. But for now, I'm going to roll it back and talk a little bit about myself and Green Story. So my name is Akhil. I'm the co-founder and co-CEO of Green Story. And at Green Story, what we basically do is help you with the sustainability communications. We are a one-stop platform that helps brands unlock the potential of their sustainability data, and thereby, we believe, achieve a better way of doing business. What we essentially do is look at sustainability on a product level and use the global standard of life cycle assessment to enable brands to accurately quantify and show the environmental performance of their products, and if needed, also offset the carbon footprint at a product level. We believe this elevates the customer experience and really helps you embed the sustainability narrative throughout the customer's life cycle and focused in on what you're making, the product. This helps increase transparency, loyalty, and helps drive revenue. With that being said, I'm super excited to hand it over to the panel, starting with Ebru. If you could please start introducing yourself.
Hi, very happy to be here, and I'm reaching out to all of you from Karachi, visiting Sortie for the line development, so very fresh information. I've been with the denim and jeans industry for over 30 years, and in fact, this is my second job around in this industry, and I'm responsible from sales, marketing, as well as sustainability communication operations of Soorty Enterprises. I've been actually intrigued with all the sustainability discussions that we have been having as the industry for the past, I would say, couple of decades. I'm an advocate of circularity, and I'm also an advocate of permaculture practices, and trying to find a match between the two is my current passion. Thank you.
All right, next up is Merryn.
Hello, hi, thanks for having me. I'm Merryn. I am the Sustainability and Technical Manager for BAM, Bamboo Clothing. As we're a UK-based online clothing business, we generally make active yoga and outdoor wear. Clues in the name, usually out of bamboo, but we also use other kind of blend with other more sustainable materials. And my background is as a garment technologist and fabric technologist, and I've recently sort of taken on the sustainability area at BAM as well. So again, similarly to Ebru, my kind of passion within that is really around circular product development, and also around kind of the traceability and transparency part of impact, and that's where we're really focused at the moment in BAM.
Thank you so much, Merryn. Lavinia.
Thank you so much, Akil. Hello, my name is Lavinia. I'm also very happy and I feel very honored to be here. What am I? Where do I come from? I think I'm a sustainability consultant. I have been a sustainability consultant and auditor for many, many years, working at a consultancy, and I cooperated with a lot of brands. I specialized in the implementation of social and ecological standard requirements in the fashion industry. And a couple of years ago, I started working at ARMEDANGELS, and this was actually my first job at a brand. Personally, I'm not a big fan of generic marketing because I don't believe in consumerism, combined in this whole sustainability space. But somehow, working at ARMEDANGELS, I felt the need to implement certain capacities in the marketing department, because it seems that communicating claims around sustainability is very hard and very complex for a lot of marketing peeps, and for the whole industry, because we basically do not really know what's happening on the ground, right? And my passion is not fashion, but I think my passion is disrupting systems. And I'm not a big fan of lies. I hate lies, and I think that's why I'm here. Somehow trying to specialize myself in green marketing and responsible communication.
I'm very glad to have you. And last but not least, George.
Hi, I'm George. I'm a campaign manager at the Changing Markets Foundation. We're a Dutch non-profit, and we seek to expose irresponsible corporate practices, which we do through a variety of different campaigns, from plastics and fashion to food and fisheries. So I lead our fossil fashion campaign, which is about exposing the underlying links between the fossil fuel industry and the fashion industry through their over-reliance on synthetic fibers such as polyester. And I also manage our greenwashing campaign, which is just called greenwash.com, which is a website that we launched a couple of months ago at London Fashion Week, or outside London Fashion Week without permission, to expose several of the greenwashing tactics that fashion brands are using to mislead consumers.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And really excited to have you all here. Before we start off, though, I do want to have a couple of housekeeping notes. If anybody on the panel has any, on the chat has any questions, feel free to drop it in the chat box, on the question box. We are keeping an eye out. We will get to the questions at the end of the panel. And in case we are not able to answer your question, we'll make sure the panelists are made aware of it and can send you a response in a follow-up email. Having said that, let's start off with the first question. It's really something that's been asked many number of times, but I never get tired of it. It's about, what does sustainable fashion mean to you? So who wants to start off?
I can start directly with a provocation, because I don't believe there does exist sustainable fashion per se, because at the end of the day, we are all operating in the same system, following the same business models, right? So we are all trying to sell more. And until today, I do not know any fashion brand who has actually implemented a degrowth strategy, which I would believe in. But I would call sustainable fashion a company who has defined a business strategy and is operating within the planetary boundaries. That would be really sustainable for me. Apart from this, there's a lot of sustainable efforts and sustainability efforts, like reducing impact scenarios and so on. A lot of fashion brands are doing, but I don't know any brand where I would say, yes, this is really a sustainable fashion brand.
Yeah, I would sort of echo that. I think sustainable fashion as it needs to be in terms of existing within planetary boundaries, and kind of conforming to that idea of sustainability, doesn't really exist. Also because a definition of sustainability that I always use also includes like human flourishing, because that involves a kind of social justice content as well, or element to it as well. Whereas the most of the sustainable fashion brands you look at wouldn't actually be able to fulfill that kind of human flourishing model, because they are much smaller. They're not going to be able to provide enough products for people, because as soon as they were take that very sustainable small scale model and scale it up so it's managing to provide for people, and it immediately starts to looking something like a larger fashion brand with a huge outsized footprint. So yeah, I think the current paradigm, it's really difficult to find any example of a truly sustainable fashion brand that could also meet that social justice and human flourishing element.
Yeah, I think I would agree with that. I don't think that. Oh, sorry, am I getting a bit of an echo?
Just a little bit, I think. Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah, I was just gonna. Even though I work for what we would call ourselves a sustainable clothing brand, on a personal level, I kind of agree. I don't think that any clothing brand kind of exists that has got everything right yet. And I think part of the reason for that is because the systems and the technology and the materials that we need to be an industry that has a positive impact on the environment, so humans flourishing, regenerating ecosystems, regenerating nature. That's what we want to be, but the kind of systems and the way that we produce product and wear product and the materials that exist, like that doesn't exist yet. And so I think brands that are investing in the future and innovating and investing in technologies, those are the brands that are certainly a lot further ahead on their sustainability journey. But yeah, I would tend to agree with you both. I don't think it necessarily a perfect version exists yet.
I also agree that the perfect version does not exist, but I see sustainability as kind of like a complete responsibility scheme and a moving target. I mean, for not just only the brands, but it's also for the whole supply chain. And I am really glad that finally we've moved from discussing whose responsibility it would be to be sustainable. So at least that's out of the equation. And we're talking about more collaborative models. We're talking about the supply chain, helping each other out, that brands could not be sustainable, per se, without the supply chain. So at least that's being discussed. What we're not really maybe focusing on is the true need of the consumer. So what does the consumer really, really need within the whole, dialogue of the sustainability? We've already exhausted the word. I mean, sustainability is done with, but we have to kind of like bring forward what sustainability is entitled to achieve and consider it not an absolute equation, but again, like a moving target forward. And there's a lot of information sharing that we need to do, a lot of education that we need to do. Brands need to look at their supply chain as their partners, because the competition will lie within the supply chain. And again, I love degrowth. I mean the idea of degrowth, but also we should not forget that there are millions of people who are feeding on the, more coming from the manufacturing part, who are really getting their livelihoods from this industry. So how do we really fine tune the whole human perspective, the social perspective, to really become forward without really compensating from the responsibility as well? That's a big question.
Absolutely. It's like a systemic question on top of everything, because everything is measured by GDP and like almost the wrong factors. And also like on a brand scale, like what's the replacement that we're doing when you're pushing out the less sustainable brands, or like the brands which are not even on that journey, with like a little bit better practices, I would say, right? So it's a very interesting thing, and actually that comes up to a lot in the idea of how brands present themselves. And George, that's something you've been studying a lot with the launch of greenwash.com from the Changing Markets Foundation. So can you tell us a little bit more about that, and especially as you see it, when brands are communicating sustainability and green claims, what are some of the do's and don'ts that you see in the space?
Yeah, so we kicked off this work last year in the summer of 2021. We did a market analysis of 4,000 different products across 12 online brands to see what green claims they were making. And then we assessed them against the Competition and Markets Authority, which is the UK kind of consumer protection authority, their green claims code, which is 6 different principles, such as comparisons must be meaningful and clear, claims must include the full life cycle of the product, etc. And what we found was that 59% of green claims made by fashion brands were misleading or unsubstantiated. So it's clearly a really big problem, and a really big problem with greenwashing. So what we did next was then take all of those examples with unsubstantiated green claims and see what kind of common threads were coming up. What were the common ways that fashion brands were greenwashing? And we compiled these all together on greenwash.com. And really the idea of that is that we're giving consumers, customers of fashion brands, the insights they need to be a little bit more critical about, because we saw a lot across these 4,000 different products we looked at. We also saw a lot of substantiated green claims. We saw a lot of brands that were giving enough information and being clear enough and transparent enough about exactly how that product was sustainable, so you're not like buying it on a false pretense. But yeah, I think some of the do's and don'ts, they're sort of within the guidelines. I think one of the interesting ones is meaningful comparisons. So we saw an example from M&S, a British brand, a British retailer, of labeling products as kinder to the environment, but not giving a meaningful comparison as to what that means. What kinder than a bucket of sand, kinder than a bar of soap? Like it doesn't mean anything. And we saw this in Tesco's as well, making that claim about a plant-based burger. So meaningless comparisons. Ignoring the full life cycle of the product is another one, which we see particularly with the use of recycled plastic bottles for clothing. It's not a sustainable solution. It's downcycling plastic bottles, taking them out of a potentially circular system, downcycling them into clothing, and then they'll just end up in landfill or incineration at the end of life. Because it says recycled and because you can claim that it comes from plastic waste, which is something people care about, that counts as a green claim. So that's completely unsubstantiated. We also looked at a lot of like the initiatives that brands are bringing up. So not necessarily on the products, but projects and like token projects that they're doing. So a great example is H&M's Loop project. That's looped with 3 O's. It's like a recycling machine that's in a really cool kind of space, and you feed your t-shirt in one end and it shreds it up and recycles it into something else. And it is a load of BS. It's just like a total marketing thing. It's saying we did some estimations that it would take something like 1,000 years for them to process 1 week's worth of textile waste. And even if they scaled up to having 1 in each store, it would still take an absurd amount of time. So it's just them trying to say, look, don't worry about buying new, don't worry about buying new clothing because we can recycle it. And if you buy stuff with recycled content in it, you're helping the problem. And really, you're not. And it is just a marketing technique to get to calm our guilt, because we know what we need to be doing, which is buying less clothing and wearing the current clothing we have much more.
Thank you. Anything else to add? I think this is definitely a hot button topic, and I'd love to get everyone's perspectives.
Well, I think for us at BAM, it's really interesting to hear George talk about that campaign, because it's really challenging to try and market your clothing and find simple messages for customers. I think we all know that customers can only want to take in so much when they're trying to make a purchase like as small as a t-shirt. There's only so much information that they can kind of take in, but all of the challenges and all of the claims and all of the context behind those claims is really complicated. And so we're constantly battling with that and trying to find like what is the simple message that we can use, but making sure that we have all of the layers of information and the detail under that for customers that want to find it. But I think finding that like punchy thing that you want to put on your label is really, really difficult. And yeah, I mean, an example of that we've had that speaks exactly to what George is talking about with the recycled bottles is we recently launched a range of outerwear, and we're a kind of a nature-based clothing business, and we always minimized synthetics, but we wanted to make a high performance range of outerwear. And so we knew we were going to need to use polyester for that. The light's just gone off in my room. Sorry, I don't know how to make that go back on. We knew we needed to use polyester for that, for performance, but we also really didn't want to just make another recycled polyester jacket that was, made out of bottles and was going to end up in landfill again. So we worked for years, and we worked really hard, and it was really challenging, but we made a jacket that was 100% recyclable. And that was the crucial thing about this jacket, was we worked with a recycling processor. We certified that the jacket was going to be recycled. We paid an upfront deposit per item. We launched it with a take-back scheme. We did so much work to make sure this jacket, to really make sure that even though we were taking bottles out of that system, we were making something that could then be recycled back into fibers over and over again. And it landed really well in industry, and we even won an award for it, and that was great. But sales don't reflect that, and customers haven't understood, really. I don't think that they've truly understood what is special about that jacket. And I think if you ask most consumers, what's the difference between this BAM jacket, which costs the same as this other recycled jacket in the market, but there's all this story behind it, and we've made sure it's recyclable and all of this. And I don't think that most of them would really understand what the difference is. They just see that recycled from bottles, and that's kind of enough of a tick for them. So that's been, a really challenging one for us, and really difficult to find the punchy message that's going to get your story across, but that isn't overclaiming, is really challenging.
Anything to add on that, Lavinia or Ebru?
Coming from the manufacturing perspective, there's so many layers that we need to kind of relay on to the brands and the retailers, and then the brands and the retailers have to relay on to their customers. So again, we have to think as a manufacturer from day one, from the way we design, as to what that would mean for the consumer, and then work together with the brand to really bring on that communication. Because also, it's not just about a product or a collection or drop collection. It's about the whole ethics and the whole infrastructure of a company. And again, tied into the supply chain, that has to come forward as the message, as the true message. And it's complex. It's like there's technological details, there's data to be followed up, there's so many details that you cannot really define within one product. And it's the impact that product makes is important, but it's actually what that whole supply chain means is more important. We have to kind of look at the impact of the supply chain and bring it on as a simple communication. That's what we tried working with Green Story. Coming from a manufacturing background, we dared to kind of go into the LCA analysis of a couple of products, triggering the need to do more inside. So we're now working on a calculator, and it's not just a few products. The few products were a means to teach inside the company something about the whole, process details and what that would mean to really bring it on to not just the brand, but to the consumer. And I think it's very complex. So that's why I always call it a moving target rather than this absolute, formula. And our industry is only starting to work with data, only starting to work with actual numbers. That's why we don't have common standards. That's why we're not really able to benchmark, best practices with real data. I think we will see more development in the coming 10 years, but that's where we stand right now.
Okay, there's so much information, from the consumer side and then from the supply chain, and I do agree with each and everybody of you. And I think, Merryn, in the case of your project, this was a super innovative product, right? So yeah, eventually then all marketing forces and budgets should have gone, into that product and this marketing campaign to eventually make it successful. But I think coming back to the basics, I think what what all brands need to do is, first of all, like as first step, is to define the claims. Like each and every brand should define what is sustainable for them, on product level, but also on business strategy level. So in the case of, I don't know, it was Marks and Spencer, right? A German supermarket did the same a couple of years over here with this Kinder. They should have defined very clearly and transparently for the consumer what that means. Eventually, like, I don't know, this product is kinder to the environment because it at least uses 50% less water than like a conventional product, or reduces whatever. And the same with all these vague definitions. Each and every brand has to define for themselves what is eco-friendly, what is low impact, what is sustainable, what is green, what is this and that. And then at least there's a kind of guidance and you can build on that. I think this is the first step. And the second step is then to generate primary and secondary data, as Ebru said, which you can only get from your supply chain. Yeah.
It's probably one of the hardest steps to take. It actually brings to a very interesting point, which a few people in the audience have brought up as well. And Merryn, it's something you experience almost firsthand. It's taking all of that amazing work that you've done and communicating to customers who a lot of times might be indifferent, right? And I think when you talk about this kind of stuff to the marketing folks, they're like, people don't want data, they want stories, right? They want to kind of have it easily packaged and digestible, but it's hard to present that kind of data to end consumers, but also satisfy requirements in terms of ensuring that transparency is there, ensuring you're not oversimplifying the message, because that's the last thing you want to do, because sustainability is so tricky. So there seems to be a little bit of work required even in internal communication, because the sustainability team has their big life cycle assessment report and everything else done, but then the marketing team comes in and says, here's the headline, this is more sustainable, plug that into the product page, that's it, right? So what's kind of like, from what you've done, like what are some of the challenges that you faced in terms of that internal marketing as well, and how has it translated into external marketing? When you create the reports, you generate everything and cross all the T's, dot the I's, and then start giving it off to somebody in your company and they completely mangle it. What's the best way to go about it?
I mean, I don't know exactly what the best way to go about it is, but it's definitely a challenge for us as a business. We're a really small business. We're a really small team. We're really lucky that we have, a marketing director and a marketing team that are all really passionate about these issues and passionate about, doing something positive with our jobs every day. But that doesn't mean that they understand all of the technical detail. They want the punchy headlines, and then I'm at the other end, and I'm a technical person. I'm a garment technologist. I know about supply chains and fiber production and all of that kind of thing. And I'm a bit dry and boring. If you left me to do all the marketing material, it would be very dry and boring, and I would over explain everything to the nth degree. And so it's always really, really difficult trying to find that balance. It's almost like you need a sustainability comms interpreter or something that knows enough about both sides to be able to communicate those things. But in a small business like ours, we don't have the resource to be able to do something like that. And so yeah, I mean, it's a constantly really challenging thing to do. I think the more that we can pass on that knowledge about the complexities of the supply chain, and that's why transparency around everything that we're doing to do with impact and traceability and mapping our supply chains, the more transparent we can be about that, the more our customers are going to understand it, but also the more internally our own staff are going to start to understand the challenges that we're facing. And maybe that will help. Maybe that's the answer.
Yeah, I mean, I'd add to that. I think there's something interesting about the level of effort that it will take to communicate sustainability in an accurate way, and a lot of that will be regulated quite soon. That if you want to communicate sustainably, or sustainability in the UK or in the EU and potentially in the US at the end of this year, you're gonna have to follow very, very strict principles, which are your copywriters and your marketing team are not gonna be particularly happy with, because it's not sexy, it's not interesting, and it takes up space. So I think we'll actually just find many brands not making green claims anymore. And then that disincentivizes them from actually reducing their impact in their operations, because if you can't brag about it at the end, then why would you do it? Because you're a profit-making business. That is the harsh reality. So I think I spend a lot of my time talking about greenwashing and a lot of my time campaigning on it. And like, I can't tell you how many webinars and how many speaking things I've done in this year alone compared to the year before. So it's you know, gone a bit crazy at the moment, which is fantastic. But we have to be mindful of the fact that if you take regulation on greenwashing, or if you take brands' action on greenwashing to its furthest extent, so all the products online that have a green claim are perfectly articulated and everything else is out. A, do consumers care about it? And B, have you actually made any difference to the overall sustainability of the industry? Both no and no. So what you need is regulation. What you need is minimum standards for sustainability, so that any product placed on the market, regardless of whether it has a green claim, adheres to a certain level of sustainability. So I think it's this wider goal. Like I always describe greenwashing as dangerous in 3 accounts. It misleads consumers, it's uncompetitive for other businesses, and it veils the level of change that needs to happen. And that is the most important one. The level of change that needs to happen is regulatory change. It's changing the rules of the game, upending the current vastly unsustainable fashion system and putting it onto a surer, more sustainable footing that acts within planetary boundaries. And kind of greenwashing is just about like getting rid of the distraction, getting rid of the obstacles. It's not actually about solving for sustainability at the end of the process.
I do see some light at the end of the tunnel, because at least I can like tell a little anecdote. Do you hear me well? I hear myself double. Okay, good. From Armed Angels, where I worked before, because I do believe, I mean, Mother Earth is burning. Each and every beer I have with friends outside, we are talking about the war or the climate crisis. Almost everybody's talking about the climate crisis. So if you're a marketing officer or a campaign manager, or even a CMO working for or at a sustainable fashion brand, you are able to learn about how the industry works, how a product is made, and what sustainability aspects are important. It is possible. Capacity building is possible, also for marketing peers. And at Armed Angels, we did a couple of workshops and we defined a greenwashing guideline, for example. And then before me leaving, I created like a kind of intermediary position in between the sustainability department and in between the marketing department, an impact communications officer. So a person who knows about the industry, who knows about textile production, who has a sense for sustainability, and is very good at, you know, telling stories. And this really worked wonders. And I can tell you, the market, like some marketing peers of Armed Angels, especially one campaign manager nowadays, he's even more precise and stricter than me. Like, I remember a couple of emails I received where he was like, "Oh, Lavinia, can I really say it like that?" And I was like, yeah, go for it. And he was like, "Are you sure?" And I was like, yes. So it's possible for brands.
I think what Lavinia just referred to is very important. It's kind of like we have to rebuild our jargon based on the current dynamics. So, for instance, today's discussion, we had the spinning manager, the weaving manager, the product development manager, all in the same room, together with the owner of the company, because one of our leading customers, a big brand, wants everything to be circular. So they have diminished the meaning of circularity to using recycled fibers, recycled materials, without really considering if those products made out from recycled fibers and materials could be recycled for their whole lifetime. So these are really like the very delicate steps we need to consider and we need to sit together. The brands definitely, I mean, I'll have to mention it again, they have to sit together with their supply chain. When I joined the industry back 30 years ago, the denim brands used to have their own factories. They knew, they had an expertise in manufacturing. And when the whole migration of production took place, they moved away from the nitty-gritty of the manufacturing. And again, I mean, it was beneficial for their brand assets, for their marketing, but there's this whole gap started to emerge between the manufacturing and the brands. Now this has to come together again, because otherwise we will be all depending on this false, jargons that we use, and then that we try to really bring on to the consumers as well. So I love the impact communication manager, and I realized when you mentioned that that's what I've been trying to do all my life, because it's like bringing different dynamics together, questioning the data, questioning the application, and then finding a way to really bring it on as a project, a defined project, rather than just like a drop collection, a product, which is great. So thank you for sharing for that, Lavinia. Thank you.
No worries. That actually brings me to a very good point, Ebru, in terms of you're in a very unique space as a manufacturer that's really trying to reduce their footprint, and apologies for the lighting, it just keeps going on and off. And we work with you at Green Story to calculate your environmental footprint, the PEFs, and all of that for the products. But you're not a brand, right? Like Sortie as such, you're not putting it out there. So how do you communicate this to to the people that you work with, your purchasers, right? Like, so how do you ensure that the practices that you're doing, all this effort that you're putting in place, is presented the right way by the brands that you work with? And what are some of maybe you can give some best case examples on this?
Yeah, I think we're still at the very early stages of this whole collaborative approach, and it will get better as we get closer, as we get really like tighter with the brands and retailers. It's not easy because they want everything, fast. They want everything, the information fast. That is kind of like, fast communication. But when you build projects, it doesn't happen in that manner. But I think I can refer to a good example that we have on board as a project. It's called the Sortie Organic Cotton Initiative, and it drives a couple of points together. So we started a 4-year project in Balochistan, in one of the poorest areas in Pakistan, together with 1,000 farmers, and we're providing agri-finance and crop insurance to these farmers, making sure that they can get actually the premium benefit of the organic cotton agriculture. And we're working together with WWF and Organic Cotton Association, as well as Control Union is monitoring the whole supply chain. And we really packaged this, I would say, well, with details, with what we want to accomplish as a manufacturer at the end of the day, at the end of the 4-year term. And we built a marketing story around this. And this is not just impacting the environment, but it's also impacting the social aspect of the country. So it was a very easy, I would say, sell to brands. They all want to be on board. And we didn't want this to be exclusive to a brand, because they're saying, like, the crop is so limited, we want to cover everything. No, this should be open for a majority of our customers. And the idea is to really compete with our competition with projects as such, so that they can become multiple projects that we can offer the whole industry. And I could say this worked out really well. And we've also launched 3 years ago a platform called Future Possibilities, where we're engaging with all the stakeholders in the industry on multiple projects. And we're being very honest, where we are not succeeding too well, we're discussing that as well. So this is like creating the open dialogue, because this is a learning curve, and I think it's working out when you're honest and where you're not really scared to say you don't know, then it works out.
Thanks. Any thoughts from the rest of the panel on this? Maybe coming from the brand side a little bit.
Sounds good. I mean, I have always said that the magic lies in the supply chain, you know. The problem is that some brands don't understand this, or like just forgot about it, where our actual clothing is coming from, and where actually, you know, the whole sampling and, you know, processing and innovation is doing. But I think I do observe a shift in the industry over the last 4 to 5 years. I do see sustainable innovation since a couple of years is coming from the supply chain. How I like kind of assisted and accompanied the suppliers of ARMEDANGELS over a course of 4 or 5 years, I can tell you that they have developed much further in 4 or 5 years than we as a brand. And I think, yeah, and this is at the end of the day also about power structures. And we need, you know, when we talk about sustainability, we need to talk about power structures. We need to talk about how to get the value back into the supply chain. And I think this is very, very, very important also for future sustainability communications.
Yeah, the only thing I would add to that is I think there's two things. I think I totally agree with you. The key is in the supply chain. First step is mapping our supply chain, understanding who our suppliers are. But the other thing that all of this innovation needs is investment. And as a relatively small business, that's really difficult for us to drive. And so I think the key, or one of the absolute keys, is brands, especially small brands, coming together and you know, supporting suppliers to invest in whatever it is they need to invest in to reduce impact, or whatever it is if brands are coming together and kind of collaborating to invest in that. That's key for me.
I think there's also, this speaks to something about the fast fashion business model, where, you know, there's an encouragement to, or there's an incentive to shop around quite a lot for suppliers, have very short-term contracts with, for example, in wet processing, where a lot of the impact is. So if you took a large fashion giant and they're trying to phase out coal, for example, they need to have a long-term contract with their wet processing manufacturers in order to ensure that they have the capital to invest in off-site renewables rather than relying on coal. And if you're just shopping around because you're trying to cut costs here, there, and everywhere, and you got this contract with this one, and then that ends and you move on to another one, then there's absolutely no way that you can support your suppliers in transitioning to a more sustainable way of doing things. And yeah, then we come back to the business model, and there's a lot of power for brands in doing that, but it does come at a cost, really.
Right. And George, like, you know, jumping off that, like, one of the ways brands really build trust with trust their manufacturers and their suppliers has been certification schemes and a lot of voluntary initiatives. And that's something the Changing Markets Foundation has really investigated quite a bit. So can you tell us a little bit more about that? I'd love to understand, like, you know, in light of your findings and everything that you've looked into, what are some of the advice you can give for brands on certification schemes? Because I've looked at this since 2007, and I feel there's far too many unregulated things out there, and people can make really big false claims, and they're getting away with it.
Yeah, so I mean, there are over 100 textiles-related certification schemes listed in the EU Eco-Label Index. So that's just European-based, which is way too many. It means you can kind of shop around for ones with lower standards, higher standards. It's all just a bit unregulated, very unregulated. So look, the thing about certification in terms of greenwash is often brands are using certification which relates to a very, very small part of their supply chain or manufacturing or materials, and extrapolating that out to give a wider notion of sustainability about either the brand or that product. So I think one of the ways to still use certification if you need to, but to avoid greenwashing about it, is be crystal clear about exactly what that relates to. So a couple of the schemes that we looked at in this report are very much about chemical management, or very much about a specific area of the supply chain. If you're then, and brands have been hauled up for this by regulators for not being clear about this, if you'll then make it, so for example, Everlane was using blue sign on some of their products and not being really clear that it's only related to the dyeing of the materials. They're essentially making wider claims about the product's sustainability based off that. So that is greenwashing. So that's how you can kind of avoid greenwashing and still use certification. And I do agree there is that element of trust between suppliers and between the brands by using certification as a kind of proxy for that trust. But what we looked at more in general is how over the last 30 years, sustainability schemes, certification schemes, voluntary initiatives have really proliferated, but the wider trajectory that the fashion industry is headed in and the climate crisis has only got worse. So clearly it's not working. And actually, in many cases, it might be making the problem worse because it is acting as this greenwashing smokescreen, which I alluded to before, where if I'm a policymaker and I'm looking at the fashion industry and they throw all these labels and certification schemes at me and I don't have time to investigate them, I'd be like, yeah, looks like you guys have got this under control. You're pretty self-regulated. I don't need to, go ahead with legislation, or I don't need to have too much scrutiny here. So if we strip out the bad certification schemes and make sure that the ones that remain are more robust, that gets us part of the way, but we also, again, need regulation.
And maybe Merryn and Lavinia, if you could give a little bit more insight on how you have navigated it within the brands that you work with.
Yeah, sure. I mean, well, in terms of certifications, I think, it's a really difficult area because I think they can be, there's a place for them. They can be really helpful. I mean, certain chain of custody certifications, for example, we use, but we don't use the logos because we use the chain of custody kind of system, and we collect the transaction certificates to assure ourselves of the origin of our organic cotton, for example. But we don't pay all of the extra money so that we can use the logo, which, maybe that's not the best decision. Maybe we should be using the logo. But it's kind of, because so I do think certain schemes do have their place, but I think we have to accept that they are all flawed. There's always there's always going to be challenges with it, and I think it's the same with mapping your supply chain and gaining traceability throughout your supply chain. And the vast majority of brands are still relying on what we're calling declared traceability. I don't know if that's the technical term for it, but there's kind of declared traceability and then verified traceability. And I think the vast majority of traceability out there is not verified via something like blockchain. That's coming in the future, but it's not there at the moment. So there is a level of trust in the information that you're getting from your suppliers, and we do kind of just have to trust that information and work with it until technologies like blockchain and new systems become more readily available. So I think technology will be the key, hopefully.
I think there's two topics we're talking about here. One is what a certification or standard covers, which is very complex, and we can argue about this for many hours. But I think when we talk about communicating certifications or standards or logos or labels and so on and so forth, at least the industry standards and the ecological and social product standards I have worked with in the past, each and everybody has a communication guideline, and it is defined what you're allowed to say and what you're not allowed to say. The problem is that we don't read anymore. I have forwarded these guidelines so many times in my life, but it turns out that, they're kind of cryptically written. It's really hard to understand them, but it's also they are not read. And at least this is the case for GOTS, for all the textile exchange chain of custody standards. There's a guideline. For Blue Sign, there's also a guideline. And there's also actually sanctions defined by the accreditation and standard systems in case you're communicating it wrongly. But obviously, in the case of Everlane, Blue Sign was like, oh, no, for sure. Oh, it's Everlane. We're not going to say anything. But there is already help out there. So we need to know where to get the proper information, and then we can use certification as a communication tool if we want to as brands, I think.
Absolutely. And it seems we have 10 minutes left, so I'm going to bring up a couple of questions which it's been asked in chat right now, but one of them is definitely about the issues with the Sustainable Apparel Coalition and HIG, but connected to that is like it's kind of a minefield out there, right? In terms of what can you make claims of, how do you kind of present this information? So as a brand trying to do its best and source as sustainably as possible, what are some of the key steps that they can take in anticipation of upcoming anti-greenwashing initiatives and legislation? And how do you kind of just keep an eye out to make sure you're not making false steps and kind of future-proof your claims as much as possible?
I can go if you want. Yeah, so most of the regulation that's coming in place that's coming in quite soon, or is that undergoing current investigations, such as the Competition and Markets Authority in the UK, has released guidelines already on what constitutes a green claim, and has released like pretty good guidance on how to avoid that. So in that specific case, you just need to make sure you're doing everything you can according to the book. It's a bit harder to say with the EU textile strategy, which we have the substantiating green claims stuff coming up. It's actually just been delayed until November. They have some rhetoric on like what is going to count as like an unsubstantiated green claim, like saying carbon neutral by 2030 or using recycled bottles, or sort of saying eco this, green that, but they're not really clear yet. So it's quite hard to say. I do keep coming back to the Competition and Markets Authority because they do have a robust set of guidelines that I think are a pretty good blueprint for brands to be going after. But the Federal Trade Commission is also going to update their green claims code in Q4 2022, I think. So we'll have a much better idea at that stage what this is actually going to look at. I mean, just another point on certification is the EU have said that they will consider substantiation of claims to be done through the EU eco label. When we looked at all the different schemes, we found it to be kind of the best of a bad bunch. There's still some issues with transparency. They still need to revise their standards, which is very overdue. But yeah, I mean, we still come back to the same problem of like, if you have great green claims that are well substantiated, do people still care? Does that actually shift the industry anyway? Or is this just, as I described to a journalist this morning, flies around a dead horse? So I'll leave it at that.
Any other inputs?
That was on point.
It's part of a larger issue that we see as well, because if you look at how some of the guidelines are set up, I think there's a lot of vagueness to it. Even with the CMA, I think they're doing their best, but I don't think it's clear enough. And if you look at sustainability communication in general, like every label and system, including the ISO systems, like ISO 14044, 67, coming 68, they all have guidelines which are in a lot of ways not practical. Like, a great example is like for 44, if you have to make life cycle assessment claims and be consistent with the ISO standards, you need to have a third-party review, which sometimes doubles the price of the LCA itself, right? And I'm speaking from experience over there, which scares away a lot of customers. So I'm not sure about the practicality of some of these things. So like, how do you kind of toe the line here without overstepping, I guess, right? What's kind of like the middle ground?
Well, I actually, I don't know if I would do this ever again in my life, but I kind of jumped into the single individual guidelines and I interpreted them, and then I put them in our own greenwashing guideline. That was a lot of work because, certifications do differ standards do differ, there's updates and so on and so forth. But I really felt the need to do it to, to be on the safe side. And I think we all need to be on the safe side. I mean, yeah, we need to learn.
Yeah, I suppose I was just going to add that it's really, really challenging to, like, some of the like the CMA guidelines. I think I tried to do the same thing. I tried to kind of read it and understand it myself and create a kind of guide for us to use internally. And I found that really challenging because it was quite vague. So it said, don't make a claim without backing it up. Okay, but like, what counts as backing it up? Is it being able to say our bamboo is FSC certified, even though there are a million gazillion challenges with that, and it doesn't have the same impact that you would think it would have? So we don't source FSC bamboo because we don't think it's the most impactful thing to do. We're going the really long, hard way around, but that's way more difficult to communicate. And in making a claim, how do we kind of back that up with just like telling a story, like, this is where we are, this is how challenging it is, this is what we're doing about it, and it's like 2 pages, it's like a 2-page long blog. Is that enough to back up saying, that our bamboo is responsibly sourced? It's like a really, so I think some of the guidelines are not specific enough, and I mean, you can't expect them to make specific guidelines specifically for BAM clothing, because that's not going to work. But I do think some of those communication guidelines are a little bit, I would agree, they're a bit vague. Sorry, my light's coming in.
And I also would like to add that, at the end of the day, we're trying to also change the behavior of the consumer. So that's kind of like the most difficult task, as to really like get them to be a part of this whole change. And it only happens once we can really link it to the social impact and the climate impact that our clothes have. So once they understand it, I think there's a way to really start the discussion, inform them to make better choices. But it takes a lot of effort. We have to educate the consumer. We also have to educate within the bigger brands and retailers. There's a whole new generation of designers who are not really into the whole, again, supply chain dynamics. So it's a lot of education, it's a lot of training, it's a lot of communication that we need to have all together, with our collective and combined efforts to really change the behavior of the consumer.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, guys. So there's a bunch of questions that have come in on this, but we're almost out of time. So I just want to give everyone here a chance to maybe give one takeaway for everyone attendance. If you had to give one piece of advice to brands on best practices on communication, what would that be?
Sorry, George. No, you.
One of you has to do this.
Okay, I'll go. I actually just wanted to say, I just saw a really interesting comment by someone called Alexander in the chat, talking about giving the consumer information. And I know we talked about meaningful comparisons earlier, and I think that has been invaluable for us. Like, a plug for Green Story is we started working with Green Story partly because of the controversial reputation that bamboo viscose has because of the viscose process, and we wanted to try and find a way to talk about it that wasn't, holding bamboo viscose up as the answer to everyone's problems, but real, like, genuinely informing customers that it was a better and a lower impact alternative to the conventional fibers that are generally out there, and using the LCA and the comparisons and the meaningful comparisons with Green Story that we were able to put on our products was a really useful way of having like a credible kind of bit of information for for consumers to help them to make an informed choice. So yeah, I think Alexander's point about just providing information, facts and figures, meaningful comparisons can probably really help us. rather than kinder to the planet or eco-friendly. Those are the vague things that are kind of meaningless without a comparison.
Yeah, I was going to say it's kind of about radical transparency and being like as honest as you possibly can be. And that goes down to the kind of individuals in the marketing team and the sustainability team. You know, we know when we're greenwashing because it's like, oh, great, that's eco. That's gonna, you know, people are going to like that. People are going to buy that. We all can recognize it. Some of it's more subtle than others, but we can recognize it. And we know when that's happening internally. So yeah, it's about giving information, giving as much information as you can, including the information that you don't have, and being honest about that. Being like, this part of the product is as good as we can make it according to the information, according to what we have available to us and the visibility we have our supply chain, et cetera, the materials on the market. But we can't say anything about the rest of this product. So take it or leave it, really. And yeah, I think the other final point I would make is just coming back to the, like, we need to be really aware of where this is distracting us from actually more systemic action.
Okay. Yeah, what else? I think you should only communicate what you have reliable evidence for. And please always remember, there's no 0%, like there's no 0% forced labor. There's no 0% toxic chemicals, as well as there is no 100%. You know, there's no product which is 100% fair. And just stay away from these two numbers. Very far away, please.
And I would just like to add that the best products and services, they come with the culture. So it's the culture that we need to set a vision for. And it, you know, I mean, the future vision of the culture will make a difference for the company all across the supply chain, you know, whether it's a brand, whether it's a manufacturer. And internal communication is just as important as the external communication, because it's going to be building the whole dynamics. And, you know, I mean, people would like to be proud of their jobs. Especially the younger generation. So I think the culture is going to be very important.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, everyone. We're out of time, but we really enjoyed this conversation. So thank you for all the panelists for participating. And thank you to the amazingly engaged audience. I don't think we've seen so many questions and comments come up in a panel before. So really appreciate it. For the ones that we missed, we'll ensure that we reach back out to you, try to answer the questions as much as we can, even reach out to the panelists to get their inputs. From our side, we've been Green Stories. And if you do want to learn a little bit more about sustainability claims, you can check out our website, where we do practice the art of really presenting the data as it is and trying to be as credible with things. We also have several guides on green marketing and anti-greenwashing. Do have a look out, but also do check out the panelist profiles. We'll be sharing the LinkedIn and other details. They themselves have some fantastic information on their companies and on their personal profiles that you can check out. So again, thank you so much, everyone, and see you all for the next webinar.
Thank you.
Thank you, Akhil, for moderating.
Thank you very much, Akhil.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.